might already be doing in real estate, in the note space, lots of private companies, oil and gas, all of those types of investments that you're either interested in or maybe that you're already doing. All of these types of investments can be done inside of a self-directed IRA. And now there's different types of accounts that we offer here at Quest. We have traditional IRAs that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. We have SEP IRAs, health savings accounts, just to name a few. But the Roth IRA is very unique in that as you begin generating your profits off of all the deals that you're doing, your investment profits do go back into the account. However, they are growing essentially tax-free. As long as you're waiting for a couple of the requirements that we'll talk about as we go, you're immediately able to start withdrawing the earnings without any type of tax implications. So, I know for probably many of you out there, you are savvy investors. You've already done deals or you're looking to do deals. And so this account is a great way that you can really shelter yourself from some of those tax burdens that you would have from doing it outside of this type of account. So it really can be a secret weapon to becoming wealthy, not only for your retirement, but also as a means for passing on wealth for the future to your heirs, your children, your grandchildren, other family members, even charitable organizations that may one day be able to benefit and take that money once you would pass on. But before we really dive into it and talk about how it's the secret weapon to becoming wealthy, I kind of wanted to share some interesting stats with you. I remember, geez, I have to remember the exact date. I want to say it was 2012 is when Mitt Romney, I remember, ran for president. And I remember it was huge in the media at the time that Mitt Romney had something upwards of $100 million, I want to say, in an IRA. And I remember the media, it was just a complete frenzy. It was like, how could you possibly, in a retirement account, have over $100 million, when the contribution limits are relatively low, right? And especially back in 2012, they weren't what they are today, the 6,000 to 7,000. And it's kind of funny because when I looked into it, I was trying to look back and see, oh, I wonder what type of account that he had. He actually did not have a Roth IRA. It was a SEP IRA, which for those of you that are familiar with, the taxes and how they work for a traditional, it grows tax deferred. And one day you do pay the taxes on it. So certainly I think a case study there for how beneficial a Roth IRA could be, not only for becoming wealthy, but for the people that are already wealthy, right? At the end of the day, if he had $100 million account, he's going to have to pay taxes on that one day. Versus if you're utilizing a Roth IRA, again, as long as you wait until you're at retirement age and you've had the account for 5 years, you can immediately start withdrawing all of those profits tax-free. And so as I was reflecting back and thinking of that, I started thinking, well, I'm sure there's lots of other very successful, affluent business people who have also used these types of accounts. And my thought ended up being accurate. So I looked it up, and some of these names are huge business people. And I thought it was interesting because the one thing that they all shared in common, all of the people that I'm about to mention, is they are investing, one, with self-directed IRAs, but for the most part, all of these individuals are investing with specifically Roth IRAs. Because again, it's not only a weapon for becoming wealthy, but also it's a way for successful, wealthy people also to be able to invest in these accounts and to shelter the future earnings that you're going to be creating for yourself, also tax-free. So just to name a few, I won't bore you with all the names of these people, but I thought it was interesting. One of them was Max Levchin, who is the chairman, the creator of Yelp. He had a Roth IRA and invested with that. He was only in his 30s, and he ended up, off of just one investment that he did when he was investing, he was one of the early investors also in like Facebook and some of those other big tech companies out there, ended up making in just, again, one investment, $10 million that was completely tax-free in that Roth. Peter Thiel, who's the CEO, the creator of PayPal, right? So another huge company. This CEO, very savvy, very successful, also using a Roth IRA. And, I think it kind of just speaks to the fact that this is a vehicle that is very popular. It's got a lot of mystery around it, but it can be very beneficial for just the everyday investor. Those of you that are wanting to, really take control of your retirement account, create those tax-free profits. But it's also a very, very popular type of account for individuals who are already successful, again, to shelter some of that wealth. So let's dive in and talk a little bit more about that Roth IRA. Before we do, guys, just really quickly, as I said, my name is Anne Marie. I am our sales officer here at Quest, as well as a certified IRA specialist. I've been with Quest for just shy of 8 years now. I think my anniversary is actually next month, so I guess I can officially say that pretty much. But I've been with Quest again for quite some time and worn a lot of different hats. I work currently in our Houston corporate office, but previously did work in our Austin office. I have, done a lot of different things in my time here at Quest, from being in our new accounts department to being the director of our marketing department, an IRA specialist. But now what I do is I work in conjunction with our IRA specialists, and really what our focus is to educate both prospective clients, those of you that are interested in self-directing, as well as existing clients, on all of the incredible benefits that go along with these types of accounts, kind of the do's and don'ts in terms of transactions, help you to facilitate moving existing accounts over, and a bunch of other stuff. So happy to be here with you guys today. Thanks so much for having me. And with that, we'll go ahead and go into it. So our disclaimer is that at Quest, we do not provide any tax, legal, investment advice. We don't endorse any products or services, investments of any type. All of the information and materials are strictly for educational purposes only. All parties are encouraged to consult with the people on your power team, right? Your attorneys, your financial advisors, before entering into any type of investment that you do. Basically this is breaking down as an explanation of kind of what we do and we don't do at Quest. With a self-directed IRA, one of the reasons why people pursue these accounts is that they really want to be in the driver's seat, right? They want to be in control. You're the entrepreneurial type. You want to choose your own investments and kind of have, the keys in your own hand, so to speak. So that's the huge benefit of self-direction, right? You're the one that's going to be choosing your own investments and you're in control. But one of the really, really important things that goes along with that is being able to do your due diligence and make sure that you're making those good investment decisions before engaging into any type of investment. Us at Quest, we love to talk about all the different investments that you can do. We're so passionate about self-directed IRAs and investing in general, but we can never really provide you guys any type of investment advice. We can't sell you investments, right? That's why you're pursuing a self-directed IRA. And so we always encourage you to consult with your attorney, your financial advisor, if you have a real estate mentor or coach, prior to doing any type of investment with us. So what are we going to talk about today? First off, we're going to talk a little bit about why Roth IRAs were created and how they differ. Prior to doing that, we'll really briefly, in about 5 minutes, 10 minutes or less, we're going to go through and we'll talk about some of the other different accounts that we offer here at Quest. But really, we're here to focus in on the Roth IRA for today. We'll talk about what are the top about 10 benefits of these types of accounts. I kind of explain some of those. And then, as I said, the presentation will be about probably 60 minutes or so. So we'll show you where you can find more information and education after the presentation. Truthfully, guys, this is really going to be just the tip of the iceberg of all of the incredible education that we offer at Quest. At the end, I'll talk a little bit about some of the free events that we have coming up that you can participate in. And again, Evan Reeves, who's along moderating today with me, will be able to send you some links as well. Okay, so for those of you that maybe are tuning in for the first time with us, you've probably heard of self-directed IRAs, but maybe you're wondering, what exactly is the difference between, a regular IRA versus a self-directed type of account? We kind of joke because sometimes we'll have a client in the office and they'll be filling out the application to set up an account with us. And, they'll mark Roth IRA or traditional IRA. And, sometimes they'll kind of stop for a minute and say, well, actually, I might have the wrong application here. I see it says Roth IRA, but I'm looking to open up a self-directed Roth IRA. Can you get me that application? And, I tell the story just because I think that it really speaks to, kind of the misconception that surrounds these types of accounts. I can't tell you how many times people will say, oh, is a self-directed IRA, is that kind of a new thing? Is it a new law that's been passed? How is it that I've never heard about this type of account? The truth is, though, is that there's actually no difference at all between a self-directed IRA, an account that we would offer here at Quest versus any other type of account that you might have elsewhere, Charles Schwab, Fidelity, kind of the big name financial companies. There is no difference. Really, it breaks down that self-directed is kind of just a marketing term. It's just trying to get across the point that you are the one that's self-directing, right? You're the one that's choosing your own investments. But we like to say that, an IRA is an IRA is an IRA, no matter where it's at. So we'll use me, for example. I do have a Roth IRA with Quest that I like to invest in primarily notes with. And I also have a Roth IRA that I like to, again, choose some of my more traditional style investments, my stocks, my mutual funds, and things of that sort over at Fidelity. So let's compare the two. My Roth IRA that I have at Fidelity and my Roth IRA that I have at Quest are exactly the same account. They're exactly the same. So how much I can contribute, what the retirement age is, what the tax benefits or, implications of doing something is, all of that is standard, no matter what company you're with. And we're just using Fidelity because that's who I use, right? But insert whoever you're with. An IRA is an IRA is an IRA. The accounts are exactly the same. Really, the difference is not in the account, it's in what the company allows you to then do with that account and what you can invest into. So at Fidelity, I'm able to invest in all types of publicly traded investments. And at Quest, I'm able to invest in all types of private assets. So the big difference is in terms of what the companies are going to allow you to hold with those two accounts. Over at Fidelity, I can do my stocks and my bonds and my mutual funds and my CDs, my annuities, right? Kind of the traditional things that most Americans are doing. And then over at Quest, in addition to that, I can use my Roth IRA here and invest in real estate assets, note investments, private companies, and a lot of other types of investments. These are the account types that we offer here at Quest. They're broken down here into the three categories that you see of personal plans, employer plans, and special plans. The traditional and Roth, these are really some of the most popular accounts that we offer. Kind of the average person tends to have perhaps a 401k or, a pension, 403b, some type of work-sponsored employer plan. You were a teacher, you worked for the government, or you used to work in corporate America. And once you leave those types of positions, you then become eligible to move them over into a traditional IRA and not have any type of taxes when you would do that movement. And so for that reason, traditional IRAs are a really, really popular type of account because, like I said, a lot of Americans do have that previous work-sponsored retirement plan, and they don't even realize that they can do something alternative to stocks or mutual funds. So that's a really popular account that we see our clients have. And basically, once you start investing in the traditional account, your earnings are growing what's called tax deferred. What this means is that, as you generate the profits off your deals, they do go back into the traditional account and you're not taxed on them. That being said, it's called tax deferred, right? So what it means is that your taxation is simply pushed off into the future. When you take those distributions out in your retirement in the future, the idea is that as you take the funds out in the future, you'll hopefully be in that lower tax bracket and then theoretically pay less in taxes. That was, the kind of epitome of retirement planning and saving for so many years. Traditional IRAs were created back in like 1974. So they've been around for a really long time, and they're a very popular, very well known, very utilized type of account. But in, really just the last 10 to 15 years, Roth IRAs have just had such an increase in interest, I think, because of kind of the shifts that we're seeing. As there's some ambiguity as to what will happen with taxation. For some people that they're thinking, hey, I'm not going to be in a lower tax bracket when I retire, right? That may not be the case. I think due to some of those reasons, Roth IRAs have really grown in popularity. The Roth IRA, similar to the traditional, as you do your investments, your profit goes back into the account. However, as long as you wait until you've had the Roth IRA for 5 years and that you're above the age of 59 and a half, you can immediately start withdrawing your earnings completely tax-free. So you can really see how this is a very powerful type of account. We'll talk a lot more about that as we go through, but just to quickly go through the other ones, we have our employer plans, our SEP IRA, Simple IRA, and Solo 401k. These are great if you're self-employed. Perhaps you never worked in corporate America or worked in a position where you had one of those previous employer plans. Instead, if you're working, in your own business, maybe you work for yourself, you don't have an employer that's perhaps putting 3 to 5% and you're putting funds in and then it's increasing in that manner. So, alternatively, to prepare for retirement, you probably need to be saving and putting more into one of those accounts yourself to offset that. And that's really where these employer plans come into play and can be beneficial. SEP IRA, Simple IRA, and 401k have very, very large contribution limits. And in fact, you can also, for many of these, get a personal deduction back to your business as well, a tax deduction for that. So definitely something to consider if you fall into that category. You can certainly utilize these types of plans. And again, they grow in a similar manner to a traditional IRA in that they're tax deferred. One day you'll pay the taxes. However, you can convert these to Roth IRAs as well. So for those of you that already have SEP IRAs or have Simple IRAs, or that really would be beneficial to you, don't forget that you can really have your foot in both sides and have both types of accounts. And then lastly, our special plans. These, I think, are so underutilized, but really have huge benefits that can be immediately seen. A lot of times for IRA investing, it tends to be a bit of a long-term play, right? Unless you're very close to 59 and a half, or you have some specific circumstances where you're able to access your IRA funds early, it's kind of a long-term play, right? You're not able to immediately withdraw the funds without implications, right? Because it's a retirement account and that's how it was designed, is to ideally have you leave the funds in there. That being said, these special accounts, the Coverdell Education Savings Account and the Health Savings Account, are unique in that they actually allow you to start paying for everyday expenses for education and for health today, tax-free today. So it's not that long-term play. It's not waiting until the future to be able to reap those benefits. You can start using it right now with tax-free distributions. So the Coverdell Education Savings Account, this one is designed to be used for your children, could be used for your grandkids, and it pays for their education expenses. So it can be invested in exactly the same manner as your traditional or your Roth or your SEP, and in fact can even be partnered together. So maybe you've got a little money in your retirement account and then you're thinking about also setting up an education account for your children. You could do that and pool the money together and have investment profits going back into those different buckets, so to speak. So the Coverdell account, again, it's really broad in terms of what it'll cover. It pays for tuition, it pays for books, school supplies, lots of different options there. And for those of you that maybe are even doing distance learning right now, right? You have kids that are at home. It could even pay for things like a laptop or other equipment that are needed, even Wi-Fi in your home. If your kids are logging on and using the internet in the home, then that's an education expense that they need. So definitely something to consider for those of you that have children. And it can be used all the way up until the age of 30 too. So it's K through 12 and beyond. Last but not least is our health savings account. Our health savings account is one of my favorite accounts, truthfully, because it really has kind of a twofold benefit. Your HSA, as you make deposits into the account, you can get a tax deduction back, right? So if you happen to owe any taxes this year, as you might be upcoming doing your taxes as we approach April 15th, as you're doing that, consider establishing a health savings account and making a contribution into the plan. You can get a tax deduction simply by making a contribution into this account. So rather than paying Uncle Sam, why don't you pay yourself and put some money into a health savings account? And then in turn, right, you're saving for your future, you're saving for your health expenses that may come up, but you're also not having to pay those taxes, right? Kind of a no-brainer there. In terms of what it can be used for, the HSA, once you start having money in that account, you've invested it, you've got profits in there, you're able to, again, withdraw the money immediately tax-free to pay for all types of health expenses. My husband and I have both had one for years now, and it works really well for us. We're relatively healthy. You know, we don't have a huge amount of health expenses. We're very lucky in that way. But when we do, it's really not even a consideration of where that money is going to be coming from, right? We both wear contacts and glasses. Those every year when we go to the doctor and we get our prescription, we then go and we pay for those contacts and those glasses and that vision care completely tax-free from our health savings accounts, just by doing a few deals a year inside of this type of plan. But it's really broad. It covers things like dental, it covers surgeries, x-rays, prescription medications, just to name a few of the many, many things that you can do with this type of account. So really we have a very broad variety of accounts that we offer here, all with a huge amount of benefits. And as I mentioned, if you caught on to what I said just a minute ago, is in fact, all of these accounts can even be partnered together and used in conjunction with one another. So it's definitely something that I've seen our clients do where they may invest, at the beginning just with their own retirement account, but then really hear about, hey, this HSA sounds very beneficial, or hey, I think I need to start saving for my kids' education. And they start using multiple accounts. So what you're seeing here is the individual versus the partnered vesting. It's important to remember that, when you're investing with your IRA, obviously that's your money, that's your nest egg that you're going to live off of in the future. But it's really important that when you're thinking about the use of your IRA in terms of investing it, remember, it's not you, the living, breathing person, and your IRA as one and the same. You really want to think of them as two separate entities. And while you're the one that's choosing the investments and you're the one that's directing Quest on what we should do to invest this account, it's still your IRA really as its own separate entity that's actually doing the investing. And so this individual vesting that you're seeing right here, Quest Trust FBO John Smith IRA account number, that's actually how your investments will be titled. So if you went out and, let's say, just to keep an easy example, you went out and you purchased a property, your, the buyer on the actual contract, the owner of that property, the one that's taking title to it, is not you, but rather it's this IRA account. And so it's going to be Quest Trust for the benefit of your first and last name and your IRA account number. And that's the owner of the account. So, for example, if you had then tenants in there, right, the owner is that vesting here, and they're going to be paying rental payments back into the account, right? So the IRA owns the investment and the IRA receives the profits back. The partnered vesting that you see here would be in the instance that you did use multiple different accounts. So really the only difference you're seeing here is there's a second vesting, and it shows the ownership percentages. In this case, 50% by John Smith and 50% by Jane Smith. This is optional, guys. It's 50-50 on here just as an easy example for you to understand. But me personally, I think that the investment that I had the most amount of IRAs partnered on had 8 different ones total. Right? Those were not all mine. with some of my, friends, family, things like that. But it really just goes to show you that you can get the whole family involved. You can get multiple of your accounts involved, more people able to do more deals, right? And these are some of the common investment choices that we see at Quest. Again, we kind of break them down into the three categories of real estate, private entities, and promissory notes. So let's dive in now and actually start talking about what we're here to chat about today, is that Roth IRA. As I said, the traditional IRA was kind of the epitome of retirement saving, and that was the way that Americans were preparing themselves for the future. However, in 1997 was when the Roth IRA was created. Talk a little bit about why. Not going to go into a huge history lesson here for you guys, but just so you have a little bit of background here. So basically, it was created in order to create more diversity in terms of the retirement account abilities. If you're familiar with traditional IRAs, you get a tax deduction dependent on your income, but you get a tax deduction as you make contributions into the account. It's actually kind of the opposite setup for Roth IRAs. Your contributions are after tax, so you don't get a deduction in them. However, your future earnings are growing completely tax-free as long as you would wait until 59 and a half and you've had the account for 5 years. You're able to then withdraw the funds completely tax-free. So it was really to incentivize for saving for retirement by providing Americans a different option. And of course, the huge benefit being that the tax-free withdrawals at retirement versus the traditional account. So this kind of gives you an example of how exactly the Roth IRA differs with the creation of 401ks, with traditional IRAs, SEP IRAs. Really, the tax benefit for most of those generally comes today, right? The benefit is that as you begin making your contributions into the account, hopefully, you qualify and receive those tax deductions. So as you save for retirement, you're being incentivized by the government. Essentially, in return, you're going to be paying a little bit less on, your taxes that you're personally doing. In addition to that, the idea in terms of investing the account, not talking about contributing now, but actually investing the account, the idea behind a traditional IRA is that, you're really deferring the amount of taxation that you're going to have to pay while you're at a high earning rate. So if you're investing with a traditional IRA, let's say through your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, in order to retire in your 60s, right? That period there in the middle is going to be your highest earning, maybe your 30s, 40s, 50s of your entire life. And so the idea is that you were deferring the amount of taxes that you would pay into the future when one day maybe you'd be retired and theoretically paying, again, that lower tax bracket. However, in today's day and age, that may or may not happen, right? You may or may not personally be in a lower tax bracket. Given currently the climate, we're all kind of wondering what will happen with taxes right now. Do we think that they'll go up? Do we think that they will go down? We don't really know, right? But to some degree, it's a little bit of a gamble. And with Roth IRAs, you're not, having to even factor that in because again, as long as you're investing with your Roth account and you're waiting until 59 and a half and you've had the account for 5 years, taxes are irrelevant. Whether they go up or whether they go down, that doesn't matter to you because you're not going to pay taxes when you're distributing funds from that Roth IRA. So you can really see about how that tax benefit that comes in the future can be really such a huge, huge benefit. The last thing I'll say on that in just terms of how a comparison works is in terms of the contributions. The huge benefit of traditional IRAs is that your contributions are generally tax deductible. Again, you have to check with your CPA and explore your personal situation and what you may make in terms of your earnings, but your contributions are generally tax deductible, right? Roth IRAs are, again, kind of the opposite setup. Your contributions are not tax deductible. They are after tax contributions. That being said, this is one of the really big benefits that comes along with this account is that any contributions that you make, because they're after tax in that Roth IRA, you're able to withdraw those at any time for any reason, completely tax-free. So especially you'll hear about younger people or new investors, new retirement account holders, why they have Roth IRAs, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons is that it gives them that flexibility that if you need the money, you could withdraw it, but if you don't need it, you can invest it and grow it tax-free. So let's talk about some of the biggest benefits that surround Roth IRAs. First, I'll kind of list them out, and then we'll really dive in deeper and we'll talk about each one specifically. The first one is, this is one of my favorite ones to talk about, but anyone can have a Roth IRA. And if you were told otherwise, you have been misinformed. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about specifically Roth IRAs is that I can't have one. I can't tell you how many times we hear our clients say that, or that they've, touched base with their CPA and their CPA has told them that they're not able to have that because they're a very high income. This is to some degree somewhat true, but there's essentially a loophole that really allows anybody to have a Roth IRA. So hold tight and we'll get to that one. Like I said, contributions can be withdrawn at any time for any reason without tax implications. Contributions are still allowed at any age. They're still allowed at any age. No required minimum distributions. So for those of you familiar with traditional accounts, SEP IRAs, those accounts that have yet to be taxed, one of the requirements is that once you reach a certain age, you have to start taking distributions or you're going to receive penalties that are pretty steep. That doesn't exist with Roth IRAs. You're never required to take money out. Of course, you've got those tax-free distributions in retirement. Income diversification. We'll briefly talk about this one and talk about some of the different types of income that generally Americans have. But by having a Roth IRA, you could be creating a tax-free income stream for yourself for that future. And of course, like I mentioned already, you're really locking in now. Taxes are unpredictable, but you wouldn't have to worry about that. And you don't have to choose between your work retirement account. You can have your cake and eat it too. Penalty-free distributions. Like I said, there's some specific circumstances outside of retirement where you can actually access your IRA funds. And last but not least, we'll briefly talk about leaving your family a tax-free inheritance. All right, so let's go through some of these. So the first benefit is that anybody can have a Roth IRA, as I mentioned. But the biggest objection that we hear is, no, I can't. Not everyone can have a Roth IRA. I'm very high income. I'm not able to have one of those accounts. To some degree, you're actually correct. But as I said, there's essentially a loophole that allows really anyone in the world to be able to have this type of account. If you were tuned in right at the beginning, I mentioned some of those big names, the CEO of PayPal, the CEO of Yelp, right? Some of those really very, very successful business people, of course, these people are making well over what most of us would ever dream of, right? And they have Roth IRAs. So again, there is a loophole, and we're going to talk about that now. What you're seeing here, this chart, basically this is, again, on the left, this is the different ways that you could be filing, right? Married filing joint, married filing separate, all of these here. And then here it's showing you what your different adjusted gross incomes would be and your eligibility to be able to contribute to a Roth IRA. What you're seeing here, let's just take married filing jointly. If you're making upwards of $199,000, then you can contribute $0, right? So if you're making higher than this amount, you would not be able to directly contribute to a Roth IRA. So if you're kind of scratching your head at this point and saying, well, Anne Marie, you said that you can have a Roth IRA, how do these very successful people, how do we know people that have Roth IRAs that do make higher than, about $199K? The reason is that probably, oh gosh, more than 10 years ago now, there's essentially a loophole that was created. Prior to that period, just like there was a cap, in terms of what your income was, and you could not directly contribute to a Roth, prior to that, there was the same type of cap for being able to do a Roth conversion. For those of you that are not familiar with what that is, a Roth conversion is basically when you move money from a pre-tax account to a post-tax account. So a 401k to a Roth, a traditional to a Roth, right? Money that is yet to be taxed, now moving into an after-tax account like a Roth IRA. Well, that same limitation existed for doing Roth conversions. But back in about 2010, this was lifted. And so what happened is it created essentially a loophole where no, if you are a high income earner, you cannot directly contribute into a Roth IRA. However, you can do a Roth conversion. So should you have money in a traditional, a 401k, any other pre-tax account, you can now do a Roth conversion into that type of plan. So let's talk about that a little bit now, adding new money versus adding, existing money to a Roth IRA. Let's say that you were looking to set up a Roth IRA and you are that high earner, right? You can't directly contribute into that type of plan. One way that you would be able to add new funds in is simply by making a traditional IRA contribution and then again, doing that Roth conversion. If you caught on what I was saying maybe a slide or two ago, with traditional IRAs, one of the huge benefits is that you are able to receive that tax deduction when you make those contributions. But if you're, again, a high earner, you no longer receive those deductions. However, that's different than a Roth IRA. While you don't get the deductions for a traditional, if you're a high earner, you can still actually put your money in there. So you would essentially be making an after-tax contribution just into a traditional. And then again, because of the lift in the income limitations that happened back in about 2010, you can now convert into a Roth IRA. And so we see people do this, that they make non-deductible traditional contributions, and then they simply convert them over into a Roth. That's a great way that you could consider if you were looking to add new money and continue making contributions into the plan. But for those of you that already have traditionals or you have SEPs or you have a pension or you have a plan like that, you can simply just do a conversion, right? So you would just determine what dollar amount that you wanted and you would convert that into a Roth IRA. Now, it's important to keep in mind that when you move money from one of those types of pre-tax accounts, you are going to, generally speaking, have a tax, hit when you would convert that. So if you're someone that has, a $500,000 401k from your job, if you would move over 500,000 all in one time into that Roth IRA, that's going to be a pretty big tax bill because $500,000 is going to add to your adjusted gross income. And that, may fluctuate your tax bracket and may increase your tax burden. So that being said, we don't see people usually do that. We generally will see people just convert maybe a portion, maybe 50,000, 25,000, 75,000, whatever your comfort level is, or maybe whatever threshold you're trying to stay under for your tax, bracket. So what are some things that you'd want to consider before engaging in a Roth conversion? We definitely encourage you to chat with your CPA a little bit about your personal situation. What's your income level? What are your future plans? And in fact, you can even watch the free Roth conversion class that we have. Now, it's a great class. It's taught by the president of Quest. It's one of our favorite classes, and Evan Reeves, again, who's moderating with me today, would be able to link you to that. So if you're watching either from Facebook or from Zoom, just send a little comment and he'll be able to get you the link to that. It's totally free on our website. But just as kind of a cliff note, spark note version, what are some things that you'd want to consider before doing a Roth conversion? Obviously, the biggest one that you want to consider is, can I afford the taxes? Like I said, if you convert over 500,000 in 1 year, are you going to be able to afford the taxes that are going to come that following April? Like I said, a lot of people will do a smaller amount that they'll convert over rather than doing the full portion. Something else to consider is, in terms of paying the taxes, will you pay them personally or will you pay them from the IRA? A lot of people don't realize there's two different options to doing that, and there's some pros and cons for each of those. Is it the right timing? Will your tax bracket be increasing or will it be decreasing soon? If your tax bracket could possibly be decreasing soon and you're tossing around the idea of a Roth IRA, that could be a great time to do a conversion, right? Because if you're in a lower tax bracket, then when you do that conversion, that's theoretically a lesser amount of taxes paid. Is it worth it? How long do you have that you're planning to invest with? What's your tax bracket? What's the amount of tax that you're going to pay? Is that going to offset it with the amount of investing that you're going to do? All things that are necessary to consider. And lastly, will you need the money in the next 5 years? Whenever you would convert funds from those pre-tax accounts like 401ks, like traditionals, one of the rules that you have to abide by is that you have to leave that converted amount of money in that Roth IRA for at least 5 years to avoid a penalty of 10%. So it's not a huge penalty, right? You've already paid the taxes. We're just talking about a 10% penalty. But if you can ideally avoid that, why not? All right, benefit 2 and 3. Contributions can be withdrawn, firstly, at any time for any reason, and contributions are allowed at any age. So contributions can be withdrawn at any time for any reason. Any money that you put in, because it's after tax, you're able to withdraw that, again, at any time, any reason, completely tax and penalty free. So if I deposit in $6,000 for 2020 and, I'm in Texas and I, just had the power go out at my house and my water and all of those sorts of things. And I say, all right, well, now that it's all back on, I think I'm going to treat myself to a little vacation. I could take out that $6,000 and I could go on a vacation if I wanted to, or if I had a personal emergency and I needed that money, right? Any reason at any time, that money that you put in, you can take that out any reason, anytime. And it's not just for that year, it's actually for the lifetime of your account. So if over the next 10 years you contribute, $10,000, $20,000 into the account, you could take it out all at once. That money is yours. So I think for that reason, that's why we often hear that Roth IRAs are such a popular plan for new retirement account holders or for younger people, even minors, is because it does give you that flexibility that a traditional IRA does not have, that you can take it out if you needed the funds. And in addition to that, contributions are actually still allowed at any age, It kind of has a little asterisk that you're seeing here, just because one of the important things that you have to have in order to be eligible, you could be 85, 90 years old and still making contributions as long as you have some type of earned income. So you have to have earned income at any point in order to be able to contribute to this plan. All right, benefit 4 and 5 is that there's no required minimum distributions and you have tax-free distributions in your retirement account, in your retirement rather. So as I mentioned with, traditional IRAs, 401ks, SEPs, all of those types of tax deferred types of plans, you have yet to pay taxes in them. And so once you get to now the age of 72, it was previously 70 and a half, now it's 72, it just fairly recently changed in the last year, you would have to start taking out distributions. So dependent on how much you have in your account and based on your age, you'd be required to start taking money out of your traditional IRA and start paying taxes on it. One of the great benefits of Roth IRAs is that you're never forced to take money out of the account. There are no required minimum distributions at any point. So not only can you continue to deposit funds in there at any age as long as you have income, but you never are required to take it out. So I think this is a really good benefit, especially as we're seeing kind of some fluctuations now where Americans are retiring later, which is I think a huge reason why that age was pushed to 72. People are just not able to retire as soon, or people are living longer and wanting to work longer and living a different type of lifestyle. And so I think this is a really great benefit that you're never required to take money out. Benefit 5 is obviously, I think, the biggest benefit of all with Roth IRAs. Obviously, all of these are great, but I mean, really the bread and butter of why people are talking about this account, why they want this, is because of the tax-free distributions. Like I said, as long as you're waiting until 5 years of having the account and being over 59 and a half, all of your investment earnings can be withdrawn completely tax-free. Now, dependent on what type of money that you have in your account is dependent on how the money is going to come out in terms of taxes or penalties. This is kind of the breakdown here that you see of different types of money that you could have in your account and what the tax benefit, or sorry, the tax implication or penalty would be for when you distribute those funds. So as we just spoke about, the contributions, those come out tax and penalty free at any time. That's your money to do with as you wish. Conversions, which again is moving money from one of those pre-tax to a post-tax account like a Roth. Remember, you're taxed at the time of the conversion, and you ideally want to leave that money in the account. Now, what that means is not taking a distribution. You can invest the money, but you can't take a distribution, ideally, until after 5 years. The reason being is that you want to avoid that 10% penalty. So you can totally invest your converted money in your Roth IRA, just don't distribute it so you can avoid that 10% penalty. And then last but not least, the last category of money that you could have is your investment earnings, your profits that are coming back off of the investments that you've done. And for those, again, in order to get those as a qualified distribution where you don't pay the taxes and penalties, you have to satisfy 2 rules. It's that you've had the account for 5 tax years and that you meet one of the following requirements. For most people, of course, that's going to be 59 and a half, but there are these other 2 as well. Benefit 6 and 7, briefly just to go over this, Roth IRAs in some degree could create a tax-free, really diversified type of income stream for yourself that you're setting yourself up for in the future. And you're really locking in now. We don't know, again, what will happen with taxes as they may potentially fluctuate. You're not going to have to consider that. That's definitely something that someone that has a traditional IRA or a 401k or has all taxable type of income coming in, that's a huge thing that they have to consider, that taxes may continue to go up. Versus with a Roth IRA, even if taxes go up, I mean, as long as you're waiting until you've had the account for 5 years and you're above 59 and a half, it doesn't matter what percentage the taxes go up because you're not going to be paying those. This is kind of an example of, some of the primary income sources that Americans have in their retirement. So they may have maybe perhaps some pension money or 401k money, as pensions tend to be somewhat outdated, right? We don't see those as often. So maybe some 401k money, of course, Social Security. Maybe you still got some earnings on the side, maybe not, and savings and investment earnings. Generally speaking, most of those categories are going to be what? They're going to be taxable, right? As you take pension distributions or as you take 401k distributions or Social Security, if you still have earnings, these things are going to be taxable. And so by having a Roth IRA, you're diversifying the income stream that you can have for yourself in the future and have, yes, your taxable type of money, but then also have your Roth IRA where you can pull from that tax-free. Benefit 8 is, again, you can have your cake and eat it too. A lot of times people will ask us, well, should I do a Roth IRA? Should I do my work 401k or the plan that they offer there? You actually don't have to pick between the 2 of them. And in fact, we encourage you to take advantage of your work plan and have something like a Roth IRA here. Your 401k contributions are very, very high that you can put in there, especially if you have an employer that's matching, they're putting their percentage in there, take advantage of those funds that are being offered. But in addition to that, with your Roth IRA, you can really take control of it yourself. I know a lot of times for 401ks, you don't have a lot of flexibility for your job in terms of what you may or may not be investing into. So you do for a Roth IRA if it's self-directed with us here at Quest. So you can have, again, your foot in both sides, have that diversification in terms of investments, in terms of how you're saving for your taxation too. And even within your work 401k, you might not be aware, but you can even further diversify yourself and have both traditional and Roth funds in there. Any of your employer contributions, any of the money that your employer at your job that they put in, that money is always going to be pre-tax or traditional funds, essentially. But you might not be aware that as an employee, your contributions can be either traditional or Roth. So you have the option for either. So why not consider having, again, further diversification even within your 401k to take advantage of those Roth benefits? Generally speaking, Roth IRAs are designed to be used for what all retirement accounts are, to be used for retirement, right? When we're ready to stop working and live off the fruits of our labor. That being said, there are some really specific reasons why you may be able to take a penalty-free distribution in some specific circumstances. So there's lots of other provisions other than the ones that I'll mention here, but just some kind of interesting ones to be aware of in case you ever had to take advantage of these. Medical expenses. Especially right now, given some of the difficulties that we're experiencing with COVID, illnesses, medical expenses that become a very significant burden. This is not for the everyday type of medical expense. This isn't to go down to CVS, take a distribution from your Roth IRA and go and buy Tylenol, right? This is for serious medical expenses that are exceeding 10% of your adjusted gross income. So it's nice to know that should you have a very serious circumstance where you're not able to pay for all of your medical care, that you can begin withdrawing funds from your Roth IRA without that penalty. Also, health insurance premiums while you're unemployed. Obviously, health insurance is very, very costly for many Americans. And should you become employed, this is one of the things that you're able to pay for from your Roth IRA. Higher ed expenses. Now, this is different than the Coverdell education account that we talked about right at the very beginning of the presentation. Coverdell accounts are designed to be used for your kids to pay for their expenses from really, pre-K, from birth, as soon as they start having educational expenses, all the way up until the age of 30. So it's like K through, college and beyond, postgraduate degrees, all of it. For Roth IRAs, it's specifically for higher ed, so college and postgraduate degrees, but it's something that you could utilize to pay for not only your higher ed expenses, but also your spouse or even your children. A great one is for first-time home buyers. Now, if you're a first-time home buyer, you can take out up to $10,000 from your Roth IRA completely penalty-free, so without that 10% penalty, and you're able to use that for the purchase of your home. A couple others is qualified reservist distributions, and there's a handful of other ones as well that you can check out on the IRS website. But just kind of some interesting ones that I wanted to share with you guys that a lot of people are not aware of. Obviously, we know IRAs are designed for retirement, but there's some good provisions in there that if you're familiar with these can really be beneficial for you to add into kind of your strategy. And last but not least is leaving your family a tax-free inheritance. And one of the biggest benefits that we see with Roth IRAs is being able to pass on your wealth to future generations. So obviously, once you get to retirement, you can begin withdrawing from your Roth IRA and not pay any type of taxes on those distributions. But whenever you would have set up your account, as you were filling out the application, you do have to leave a beneficiary. So in the event of your passing, who would your account go to? And a common strategy that we see for people is to leave their account to, their children or even their grandchildren so that they have the ability to use this tax-free inheritance for that long period of time. Should you leave your Roth IRA to your spouse, basically at that time, the funds would simply transfer over into your spouse's IRA. They're the only one that gets this specific benefit. So they would be able to personally use that in their own account, and it would be just mingled with their other account that they have, their other funds. While if you left it to children or if you left it to grandchildren or other family members, it becomes an inherited IRA. Recently, the rules surrounding these types of accounts have changed quite significantly. Previously, there were strategies that you could use, and you might have heard of a stretch Roth. We talked about it a lot, as did a lot of other people in the industry, where you could really stretch the growth and pass it on to a very young child, and it could grow for the rest of their life. Just in the last year, some of these rules have changed for inherited IRAs. And for the most part, other than, for a spouse transferring it into their IRA, really the primary option is to have an inherited IRA, and it does have to be depleted within about 10 years or so. That being said, your family is still going to be inheriting those funds without those taxes that they're able to use. It's just that it has to be now depleted within about that 10-year period versus the prior rules where you were able to essentially continue investing it for the rest of your life. So a little bit of change there, but still, I mean, I would take a tax-free inheritance even if I had to deplete it in 10 years. Obviously, that's a no-brainer. And last but not least, of course, is you can always just take a lump sum distribution. So take it all out at once. So of course, we've heard of compounding interest, very commonly referred to type of term when we're talking about investing and saving. But I thought that this was an interesting one to share. Several years ago, I read one of Susie Orman's books. For those of you that are not familiar with Susie Orman, she's kind of this wild TV personality, and people will call into her show and they'll have all these crazy things they want to do. They're, $200,000 in debt, and they're like, "Hey, Susie, I want to go on a $10,000 vacation to Europe," or different types of situations. And they'll call into her TV show and they'll basically ask for her financial advice. And she's a really wild kind of personality, and will yell at them and tell them no. So it's really entertaining. But in addition to just being a TV personality, she's a financial planner. And she's written a lot of books. And in one of her books, she talked about compounding interest specifically as it relates to Roth IRAs. And so I have a chart here that shows you really how powerful compounding interest, of course, is, but compounding interest when we're talking about it in a vehicle that gets you that complete tax-free growth. So let's say that you started contributing just $100 a month, just $100 a month into a Roth IRA, and you were planning to retire at the age of 65. Well, if you start at the age of 25 versus 35, you can see that there is a huge, huge amount of difference here. If you started investing at the age of 35 and got a nice return of 10%, you would only have $217,000. Versus here, if you start at the age of 25, so significantly younger, and got the same return, you'd have more than 300,000 more. And what's interesting is that 100, again, this book was written years ago, so the contribution limits were different. But $100 by 12 months is only $1,200. The contribution limit, as you saw several slides ago, is between $6,000 to $7,000, just depending on if you're under 50 or over 50. So you can see that this would have a huge, huge amount of difference if you'd been able to do the maximum contribution. Just to show you what just even a little bit more, just a few $100s more could do. Let's say now that you started contributing $450 a month into a Roth IRA. Again, this is not even the maximum that you'd be able to do. But let's say you did just $450. Again, you wanted to retire at the age of 65. Look at the huge amount of difference here. If you started investing $450 a month at the age of 25 and got a 10% return, you'd have a $2.6 million saved up. So you can see that that is a significant jump from had you started just 10 years later. We often see people that, are even past 35, they're 40, 45, 50, and they're just really getting started to take retirement planning and saving seriously. So, it's really important to be saving, to be investing the funds. You can really see what a huge amount of difference that it makes. And in fact, many of you watching may be thinking, oh, well, I'm well past 25 years old, is it a lost cause? But not only can you start benefiting from a Roth immediately, set one up and take advantage of it, but also Roth IRAs, as well as other accounts, but specifically Roth IRAs are popular for young people and even minors. Your minor children can have Roth IRAs, can make contributions and invest the account, even partner it alongside yours. Again, as long as they have earned income. So we definitely see clients that get creative. Of course, if your kids have a summer job or something like that where they're earning income, then it makes it a little bit easier. But we've definitely seen some creative clients where they've got, very young children, they've got, toddlers, and they'll put their picture in marketing materials that they're doing for, their investing business, and they'll pay them a salary as if they're a model for that business, right? So there's lots of creative strategies that you can find. Really, the important point that I want you to take away from this is that saving and investing your funds, no matter what age, is very, very important. But the earlier that you get started, really, the better. So it's important to take action and set one up, take advantage of it. Real quick, we'll run through a case study here so that you can see kind of an example of a client that did a conversion, and it ended up being very, very beneficial for them. So before and after picture you see here, basically it was a really rundown property that the client was going to purchase. They moved over funds from their traditional IRA, and they moved it over here to Quest and had planned to do the investment in a traditional account. They had moved the funds over originally from their 401k because they had planned to, they had left that job. And so what they did is they moved their 401k funds into a traditional, and then they heard more about the Roth IRA and kind of explored this with their CPA and started thinking, well, I kind of see the benefit of this. I've left my corporate job. I'm going to be actively investing. This is going to be my, my main plan, my main source of income at this point. I think I'm going to perhaps do that Roth conversion. This ended up being very beneficial to them too, because they had also left their job. So way back at the beginning of the presentation, we talked about the fact that if you're possibly going to have a change in your personal situation, and maybe your tax bracket could possibly go down, if you left your job or something changed, that's a great time to do a Roth conversion. And that's what they did. And it ended up being a home run deal and very worth it to them. So they did convert over $150,000 from their traditional into their Roth IRA, and they ended up purchasing the property for $101,000. They rehabbed it for $30,000, and they sold it. It was actually that same year. It was about 7 or 8 months later. They sold it for $239,000. So the profit after the holding costs and all of that ended up being $94,000 in straight profit that went back into their Roth IRA. So a 72% return on investment that was completely tax-free. What are some important points to take away from this? I don't have the dates on here on this slide specifically, but they did that Roth conversion and purchased the property. It was very early in the year. I want to say it was like February of the year that they did it. When you do a Roth conversion, it's not like you immediately have to pay the taxes on that. When do you pay your taxes? The following April of the year, right? So if I did a Roth conversion on February 23rd of 2021, when do I pay my 2021 taxes? April of 2022. So if I do a Roth conversion at the beginning of the year, this is really giving me the longest period of time to be able to invest the account, grow the account, to be able to offset the amount of taxes that I'm going to have to pay to make it worth my while. So they didn't have to pay the taxes for quite some time. And as I mentioned, they'd also, they'd left their job. And so the amount of taxes that they thought they'd have to pay come that following year, they were hoping would be at a lower rate as well. Last thing on this is that when they made that $94,000 in investment profit, that's a huge amount of money to make in terms of profit, especially with it be going back tax free. Now they have $150,000 in the Roth IRA plus their profit, right, of the $94,000. They may never have to pay taxes again. If they continue to do investments that are in the range of about 100,000, 200,000 in there, right? They may never have to pay taxes again. This is more than enough money for them to invest now solely in their Roth IRA and be able to create those tax-free earnings for themselves. So who should have a Roth IRA? Really, I mean, anyone with all taxable retirement income, if you're looking to diversify, if you're looking to still make contributions, still want to shovel money into that account and save for the future, and you've got that earned income, why not? If you're looking for flexibility for young investors, for new investors, for first-time retirement account holders, this account is great because remember that flexibility of being able to take out your contributions. Anyone not needing the benefit of tax deductions. If you're doing well for yourself and you don't need the benefit of tax deductions or you don't even qualify for those, then why not put your funds into a Roth IRA? If you're expecting a higher tax bracket, obviously we don't know what the future holds. If you're looking to never be forced to take money out, if you want to avoid those RMDs, you want to make tax-free investment profits, and if you're looking to pass on wealth to the future to your heirs, then a Roth IRA is definitely for you. So in closing, what can we do for you at Quest? We help you to process your investments faster than anyone else. We do all of the account establishment, disbursement of funds, investing into your actual assets, all within 24 to 48 hours. So we move very quickly. We are investors ourselves. We are founded by investors, and so we understand what you guys need, and we are constantly trying to shape the way that we run the company and our systems around what the everyday investor really needs, because we get it. We're investors too. We hold networking opportunities and educational events for free. I'll talk a little bit about those now. And again, Evan, our moderator, can send you guys some links for the ones that you're interested in. But we have events almost every single day, believe it or not. We do kind of a variety of different events. We do weekly webinars. Some of those are going to be IRA topics like what we talked about today. And some of those are going to be where we bring in a guest speaker to highlight maybe a specific type of investment. So at Quest, we can't sell you any types of investments, but we like to just give you guys an idea from an educational standpoint on all of the different things that can be done in these types of accounts and give you that idea so that you can go out there and do your due diligence and figure out what makes sense for you. So those weekly webinars are, again, almost every single day at 12 p.m. Central. Every single Saturday, again at 12 p.m. Central, we have what we call Self-Directed IRA Saturday, where we bring a special guest speaker or, again, ourselves talking about a variety of different topics. We also have an MCE coming up. So if any of you are agents, if you're real estate agents and you're looking to get MCE credits, that is a free opportunity that's coming up. It's 3 hours of credits. It's all completely online. And I believe that one is March 18th. So if you're looking for your credits, definitely sign up for that one. And last but not least, we also have what we call our virtual networking happy hours. Obviously, the real estate community, the investment community is very, active, and networking is such an important facet of this community. And so we really, despite COVID and despite not being able to be face-to-face like we love to be with all of you, we really want you guys to have opportunities for networking, to pitch your deals. If you need private money or you have private money to lend out, if you're looking for, just to connect with other like-minded investors, we want you guys to have that opportunity. And so we do virtual networking happy hours every single month. We have 2 of them. And again, those are totally free. They're pretty low key. We come on Zoom, we chit chat, we break into small groups, we talk about deals, we talk about what we're up to, we talk about private lending. So we'd love for you to participate, grab a glass of wine and come out and network with us. And no self-directed staff understands your investments better than we do at Quest, because again, we are investors and we are constantly shaping what we do around the investor. And of course, we never charge any expedited fees. That 24 to 48 hour time frame, that's just our standard of service. Guys, this is my contact information. My name, again, is Anne-Marie Rogers. Please feel free to send me an email if you have any questions. We do free consultations here at Quest. We have a very highly trained team of IRA specialists here at Quest that can do consultations with you, talk about your personal situation and what accounts might make sense for you, talk about your investment, and help you to get your funds moved over whenever you're ready. So please feel free to send me an email if you'd like to connect. If you want a copy of the slides, you want to do one of those consultations, we'd be happy to get you taken care of. You can also find us on our website. Give us a call at 855-FUN-IRAs or check us out on Facebook or LinkedIn. We're always posting great content, educational content, upcoming events, and things of the like. So thanks so much for having me, guys. Hope everyone has a great rest of your day. I hope to see you soon. Bye.